All right, so we are going to look at this function negative x squared minus x plus 12, and we are going to graph it without using a calculator. So in order to do that, we're going to look at the axis of symmetry. The axis of symmetry is x equals negative b over 2a. B is negative 1, so negative b is positive 1 over negative 2 is the same as negative 1/2. So my axis of symmetry is going to be the vertical line at x equals negative 1/2. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug in negative 1/2 in for x so that I can find the y value of the vertex. Notice that I converted the negative 1/2 to a decimal. And again, I can do this by hand. That's not a problem. Remember, when you square a negative number, it becomes positive. 0.5 squared is 0.25. So this is actually going to be negative 0.25 because there's a negative outside the parentheses. Negative times a negative is a positive 0.5 and then plus 12. Then I'm just going to add all of this together. Negative 0.25 plus 0.5 is 0.25 plus 12 is 12.25. So my vertex is going to be at negative 0.5 comma 12.25, which is going to be on that axis of symmetry up a little bit higher. So I counted up to where 12 is, and I just went a little bit above that. So now what I can do is I can find other points that are going to be on this parabola by plugging anything in. Well, I also know that the y-intercept is 12 because I'm looking at my equation and I see that the c is 12. That's my y-intercept. So I'm going to plot 12 on the y-axis. And I also know that this parabola is symmetrical. So that means that there is a point on the other side also at 12, which is at negative 1. Okay, because those are both 0.5. They're half a step away from the axis of symmetry. So now I'm going to plug in another value for x. I'm going to plug in a 1 and see what happens. So when I plug in a 1 for the equation, remember, when I square it, I get a positive, but there's a negative in front. And so I'm going to end up with 10. So the point 110 is going to be on my graph, so I'm going to plot that point. And then I'm going to realize that it's a mirror image on the other side also. Where is that going to be? That's going to be at negative 2. Why? Because again, it's 1.5 away from the axis of symmetry. Now I want to try to see what this parabola is going to look like. I also want to try to figure out where the zeros are. So I am going to, I think plugging in a 2 isn't going to quite get me to the 0. So I'm going to plug in a 3 and see what happens. So when I plug in a 3, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to square my 3 and multiply by negative 1. It's going to give me negative 9 minus 3 plus 12. Negative 12 plus 12 is in fact 0. So there is one of my zeros, 3, 0. So I'm going to plot that on my graph. And then again, I know that's a mirror image. Now, I'm not going to go 3 away from 0. It is 3 away from 0. But that's not what I'm concerned with. I'm concerned with it being 3 away from the axis of symmetry. So that's going to put me at not 3 away. It's 3.5 away from the axis of symmetry. So that's going to put me at negative 4, 0. So those are your two zeros, and then now you can sketch the parabola because you have a good idea of what it looks like. And again, I could plug in other values to see what's going to happen, but it's not necessary at this point.